Welcome to another interview at Jose Martin Composer's YouTube channel. Today we'll bring you a moving human testimony about life in a small Spanish town during 1950s, an era shaped by scarcity, childhood labor, and kind of humility that seems almost forgotten today. The woman interviewed here chose to remain off the camera for personal reasons, and her voice has been respectfully recreated using artificial intelligence to preserve her privacy. On this channel, we deeply honor the wishes of those who share their life stories, and we work carefully to document the cultural legacy of a time that shaped generations. Today, we present a story that is not just from the past, it is a living memory that stands against the erosion of time. You will hear what it was like to grow up with little, to find joy in something simple, and how despite material hardship, there was a strong sense of dignity, family love, and community. At Jose Martin Composer, we believe in preserving these voices as part of collective memory, and as a tribute to those who became before us. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of 1950s. If this testimony moves you, please subscribe, share it, and leave us a comment. Right, first of all, thank you so much for joining me in what I will say is the most moving and extraordinary testimony we had so far in this channel. We welcome you with open arms, and we want to extend a heartfelt thank you for being here. Your testimony will be of great use for those who lived in your time, for those who live now, and for those who are yet to come. Once again, from my heart, a big welcome.
Thank you so much, Jose, for giving me the opportunity to speak freely and share my experience with the rest of your audience and friends. I hope it will be of service to the rest of you. Thank you so much.
First of all, we will begin by examining the education. What was education like in the 1950s? Did you have subjects like we have nowadays?
Well, you see, I entered school when I was 8 years old, you know? Then, since my parents couldn't afford books, the teacher gave me a book, a very large and dense book, which I think was about history. That's where everything I had, of course. With that book I had to have. I think that until I left, the only things my parents could give me were a blackboard and a pencil, so I could do something. I also remember that they took us to the big blackboard, and whoever knew something wrote on it. The ones who didn't write on it, nothing happened. They were told to sit down again. It's not like now that there are a lot of subjects and they put a lot of pressure on the kids, you know? Yes, those were the beginnings of school at the age of 8. I don't remember the subjects we had very well. I'm not sure if they included geography, history, mathematics, or language. We read what was given by hand and little else. But what I remember the most is that when I was 8 years old, all the girls who entered for the first time were put on a bench. You know, all of them on a bench. Sometimes they beat us, and the one who was beaten had put up with it. And if the teacher, who was already very old, got angry, she would put us all on our feet or there on our knees, and with a stick she would make us go green. She didn't bother to see who had started the fight or to find out anything. In other words, the school was a failure. When I was 10 or 12 years old, I left school and started working, and to this day, so have millions of girls and boys. For all the boys in the village, there was a male teacher, and for all the girls, a female teacher. They were about to retire, and they didn't want to deal with children or even see themselves in the mirror. Imagine the atmosphere that was there. The one who was impaired or had a defect was tormented to the point that they no longer wanted to go to school. The parents gave the option of studying or working, and many of the children decided to work due to bullying. It was very, very cruel.
I understand. How was life back in the 50s compared to now?
Oh, it was nothing like today. Absolutely nothing. Nothing to do with it. We didn't have tracksuits, or shoes, or school bags, or even half the stuff. Not even books. It was something else entirely.
Was it that you didn't have nothing to eat in that time?
There was food, but it was whatever the daily menu was, like, that was it. Look, in our house, if we had lentils, that was a treat. That was like luxury. Sometimes there were fried potatoes, sometimes stew. What else can I tell you? A lot of times, it was just a piece of bread with olive oil, maybe a bit of tuna, or some cod, or a sardine.
What age was you at that time, or how long it lasted?
That was from when we were very little. Of course, some people had more or less, depending on whether their father had a better job or not. You know what I mean. Some families were better off. For example, a friend of mine, her mum used to cook more and had more stuff, but in my house we were 5 siblings. And only Dad worked when he could, that is. So, what do you want me to say? We ate what we could. Later, the poor man started working out in the countryside, harvesting, all that kind of thing. Then he went to Mallorca to help build hotels. Eventually, when he got older and worn out, he came back, you know. He managed to find work with a man who owned a lot of land and stuff. He retired from that job. But we were happy, because our parents loved us. Among us siblings, there was no fighting or anything like that. That's just how it was. And we accepted it. I remember during the town festivals, when we came back home to eat dinner, Mum used to tell me, "Don't bring your friend tonight, sweetheart. There's only bread with olive oil and grapes, and at her house they'll have more food. Don't bring her, okay?" So my friend would say, "Let's eat at my place first, then we'll go to your house, and then we'll head back to the festival." And I'd tell her, "Let's just eat fast. You eat at yours, I eat at mine, and we'll meet at the festival."
It seems that there was a lot of poverty in that time.
Yeah, loads. But like I said, that's just how things were. The most important thing, in my opinion, was the love from your parents and siblings. So we were happy. We were happy.
And when did you start working for the first time?
At 12 years old, in the fields. And farm work is no joke. They took me in. By then Dad had gone off to the hotels or wherever, and for a month he couldn't send any money. So Mum and a neighbor, well, the 3 of us would go to work, and they'd put me in between them, you know? I worked alongside everyone else, but really, they were doing half my work for me. Later there were also tobacco warehouses, where they processed blonde tobacco. The grown women would hang the leaves on sticks, and us girls would hand them the leaves. You get it. So I'd go there too. There was one woman who liked me a lot, and I liked her too. She always wanted me to work with her. We also pulled flax, picked cotton, things they used to grow back then. And we were all just kids, you know? The landowner was a good man. You know. He treated us well. We were children after all, and he treated us well. That's it.
I'm just left speechless. How was the fashion in the 50s? What do you remember from that time?
Let's see. The kind of fabric people wore depended on how much money the family had, really. But most things were made of cotton. Acrylic didn't exist back then. Honestly, acrylic wasn't a thing, you know? It was all cotton. So, you had to iron it, and iron it again, and again. And as soon as you sat down, that was it. It got all creased again. That's right. Exactly. There were no mini skirts. Not yet. At least not in the time I'm talking about. Skirts came down to the knees. That was for the younger women. The older ones wore the midcalf, and the little girls too, about midcalf. You see, low necklines were only for actresses. Not for regular women or girls. No. And one generation before me, they didn't even wear lipstick. Not even lipstick. If a woman wore lipstick, they'd say she was from the arts, you know? They'd criticize her. There wasn't really makeup either. That didn't exist. And we didn't have money to buy anything anyway. Maybe in the cities it was possible, but not in the villages. There were a few powdered products, a brush, and you dab on a little bit. I started painting my nails when I was about 12 or 14. My brother would go with me, so I wouldn't have to go alone, to another village, and I'd buy an old-fashioned little bottle of nail varnish. Sometimes I'd also get a bit of cologne, but never real perfume. For nails, there were all sorts of colors, pink, red. The only one they didn't have was white. And white was my favorite. I loved white nails, you know? There were heels, but only for the young ladies. Listen to what happened to me. I was 15, and my friends started wearing heels and stockings. But my mum said she didn't want me wearing either yet, because she thought I'd look like an old woman. You see? Anyway, I had a suitor. And when we'd go out, I felt embarrassed wearing flat shoes and white socks, so I used to take the socks off and put them in my pocket. We were very particular about how we looked back then. And for everyday wear, well, always a dress. For example, they'd buy us clothes like this, a dress for me, and for my brother, a pair of underpants and a shirt for the holidays. Some shoes, and our socks. The socks were huge so they'd last the whole year. You'd have to fold half of them under to make them fit. We looked a right mess. Honestly. That outfit was saved all year for church, for Sunday, and all the special celebrations. You'd only wear it on those occasions. Then the following year, when you got new clothes, the old ones became your everyday clothes. You see. Not like now, where every 3 months people feel they have to change clothes because it's out of fashion. Back then, it was a full year, or more. When you got something new, you kept it nice for the dances and all the social events in the village. And the next year, you'd get another outfit, and the old one became your regular wear. For every day. Hairstyles. The simplest you can imagine. Long hair in a ponytail or not, with fringe or without. In my village, do you know how all the girls and women wore their hair? They all had perms, those tight curls, like a roller set. You've seen those, haven't you? That was the look. Then I went to the city with my cousin for a while. We both grew our hair long and decided to dye it. My cousin said, "Cousin, let's dye our hair. Will your dad tell you off?" I don't think so. I never do anything that would make them scold me. Come on, let's just put a bit in. So, I had a kind of bob cut, and we dyed our hair just a little bit. Not a strong color, just a light tint. When my suitor saw me, he liked me right away. He said I was different from all the other girls in the village. He said, "I like that woman." Because I had a different style, you see? I came with another look. So he asked someone in the village, "Who's that girl? I think she's lovely." And the other one replied, "Well, if you like her, go talk to her. She's young, never had a boyfriend, and comes from a good family, really nice people, you know?"
So how was the relationship between neighbors at the time compared to today?
Well, since it was a small village, and I can only speak for mine, relationships were good, you know? Like, let's say, I don't know, there was a fire in someone's house, because, you know, there were chimneys back then. If a chimney caught fire, all the neighbors would rush to help. And well, that's what being neighbors meant. Back then, everyone knew each other and it was as if everyone was family. People really looked out for one another.
However, there would have been envy too, right?
Oh, of course. Absolutely. But not as many bad things as there are nowadays. For example, if someone fell ill, and back then not everyone had access to healthcare, a neighbor would go round the village collecting from the others to buy that person their medicine.
I see, like a little fundraiser?
Exactly. Nowadays, thank God, we don't need to do that anymore because we all have healthcare. But back then, it was such a kind gesture. And the village where I lived was more like a hamlet. The nearby big town had a proper council. So the council would give a little money for the town's fiestas. But then, 4 or 5 young men, they were like stewards, would go door to door, collecting more money to make up the rest. And they did it properly, yes.
Did you go to church every Sunday?
Well, there were some who didn't, but generally speaking, yes. You see, there was, let's say, a group of people who wanted to associate with those of higher social standing. And obviously, people of better position would go to church. So if you wanted to mix with them, you'd go to church too, and that was that.
So they didn't go to church always from a deep faith.
Exactly. It wasn't all about faith. Some people did have genuine faith, of course. But a lot of it was just convenience. Faith and convenience, both. Me and my friend, we even became daughters of Mary, and they gave us a little medal, you know? And we used to help clean the church with the other girls. But you know what? I never understood why they always had it in for me. It made me nervous. I used to tell my friend, "Don't leave me alone. When you go to fetch water, I'll come. When you mop, I'll mop too." Because I was scared they'd lock me in by accident or something, and I'd die from the fright. What can I say? It was either you belonged to that group, or you were with the, well, you know, the humbler folk.
Did you all neighbors gather in the evenings outside the house and chit-chat about one another?
I don't really remember. Well, people used to sit out in the fresh air. Yes, that's it. They'd sit out in the cool evening air. And my mum wasn't one for gossip, so I wasn't either. You know what I mean? But yes, some people, especially the older ladies. Well, you know, the eagles. The eagles. Yes, the ones who kept their eyes on everything. There were neighbors who were always fighting. One would come over and sit by our fire and start gossiping about the other one. Then, 2 or 3 hours later, or whenever she felt like it, the other one would turn up. And she'd start gossiping about the first. But my mum never took sides. That's why they both came, because they knew she wouldn't side with either one.
Do you remember a historical event that you experienced firsthand?
Yes, well, there was a very big strike that left everyone shaken.
Was it like a general strike?
Yes, but it was a railway workers' strike. I remember hearing on the television that the police were dragging the railway workers through the streets and beating them with batons, of course. They also said it on the radio. This is happening in the cities. Mainly in the big cities, because in the small villages, where there were no railway workers, everything happened over there. Then the government of the time issued an order. If they don't return to work by such and such a date.
Were they threatened by being demilitarized?
Exactly. Railway workers were under sort of military structure. After beating them half to death, the poor men had to go back to work.
What would have happened if they didn't go back to work?
Well, someone earning a decent wage, maybe he was a corporal or something, would be demoted to a common soldier. So they had no choice but to return. That really shocked people, really, deeply.
Was that before the transition?
Oh yes, long before. I was just a child. I remember hearing it on the radio. I must have been about 10 or 12.
Was there something that marked you personally, something that shocked you and you were scared?
Yes. There was this father, a normal man, with his son and wife and everything. But from time to time, he'd get drunk and pick fights with whoever he pleased. He also used to steal. He had us all terrified because the civil guard were after him, and he'd hide out in the wheat fields. Sometimes he'd be hiding there for a week or 2. And when they caught him, you can imagine.
Thank you. Who was the Sacamantecas?
The Sacamantecas was an invention mothers used to scare the children. Like the boogeyman, the same thing, just another invention. Although, to be fair, my mum never scared us with that sort of stuff.
And the so-called Melete?
Yes, Malit was just a filthy guy, someone with a bad reputation, a vagabond, and that's it.
Okay. Allow me a few seconds of your time to introduce my book series to you. It is called The Dark Star, a love comedy based on true events, with a twist of fiction, of course. It is honest, funny at times, and completely from the heart. You can find it now on Amazon at the link below. I hope it makes you laugh, maybe think a little, or just enjoy it. Thank you so much and see you soon. There is something extraordinary regarding towns in rural Spain, and that's the nicknames. Everybody had a nickname. Why there was that such thing as why the nicknames are such a big thing in the rural Spain? It's still on in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, still on nicknames there. Why? Why is such a big thing?
Well, let's see, because if there were, say, 20 Johns, a bit of an exaggeration, but let's say 10 Johns, 10 Pepes, 10 whatevers. Well, no one knew who was being talked about.
Well, that was the surnames for, right?
Still, it's easier when someone from outside comes. For example, I remember from another village, kids came to town and asked, "Hey kid, what's your mum making? What are you eating?" The poor lad, who was the sweetest soul, would say, "Chips." The next day, again, "What are you eating today?" "Well, chips." And after 3 days, they started calling him Chips, and everyone knew him by that. And that was that.
Do you remember any nickname that makes you laugh?
I don't know. That's the one I remember. There was another kid they called Matches, and it was because he must have said something about matches to light fire, and just like that. He was known as that forever.
Is it true that in every village there used to be one womanizer, one drunk, one crazy guy, one of each?
How do you say it? Yeah, one of each. A queer, which was so taboo back then and so secretive, that people practically had to hide and let no one to find out. And then, the rest were just regular folk. Well, maybe 2 or 3 drunks, a madman. Yeah. And then more started appearing. And what did we say about the other thing? The womanizers, right? Oh, womanizers. Yeah. Look, once my husband and I were out for a walk. And it was just past twilight. A woman walks by, and a guy on a bike passes too. What happened was, wait. A guy on a bike comes by and spits right at the woman and says, "Get lost, you whore." And he didn't care there were people around, you know? Yeah. And there were really awful people too. I'll tell you something. When my grandma used to go to next door town. So, poor grandma was already very old, and she used to collect eggs from her clients and go sell them over there. I used to go with her, and I said, "Grandma, why is that woman so pale?" Because there were 2 sisters, one normal, the other really pale. "Grandma, why is that woman so pale?" She said, "My dear, because her own daughter-in-law said that her mother, the woman's mother-in-law, had slept with some guy." Like me saying, "My mother-in-law slept with." And then the daughter felt such shame and such sorrow that she never went outside again. She was so embarrassed and so hurt that she never stepped outside again.
That's terrible. That's terrible. Thank you so much. What do your children used to play?
We used to jump rope, and us older girls, they'd grab us by the arms and spin us around. We played ball too. We played hide and seek and all those kinds of games.
Did you go to the river?
The river was quite far for us, but there was a stream that passed near the village. We went to the stream, and we'd get into it and our fun was catching frogs, you know? Catching frogs and tadpoles. And of course, when they started jumping in our hands, we'd get scared and throw them back into the stream, you know? And I don't remember much else.
Who do you went with to the river? Who do you used to go with?
With friends. Nothing bad happened back then. It was normal. We went with our friends. My brother came with us too, you know? and the brothers of the other girls. But back then kids roamed free and nothing happened. You know, there was a different sense of morality, a different sense of morality. If someone did something wrong, they paid for it. You know, well, it's just that kids weren't attacked. Back then it was a small village. We all knew each other, and no one was going to hurt us. We could be at the stream all morning playing and nothing would happen to us.
There were much less people than today, I suppose.
Very few people, and our parents, well, they weren't. They weren't. Let's see, they weren't confrontational, but they wouldn't let anyone mess with their kids. Now I remember something. Shall I tell you?
Of course, by all means.
A circus came, you know? A circus came, and it was the day they light pumpkins. You know, Halloween. But no, that didn't exist then. That came from America later on. Anyway, my husband would take melons, hollow them out, carve a little hole, and put in a tiny candle, one of those really small ones. And that was our lantern. He made us a lantern, right? There was a boy from the circus walking up and down the streets. Of course, there were only 2 streets here. Kids were roaming freely, back and forth. And he kept putting out my brothers and my lanterns, right? And there were plenty of kids with lanterns. But for some reason, he picked us. We kept saying, "He's blown out our lantern again. Give it here, I'll light it again." But he'd blow it out again. My brother had a lot of patience, and after the 3rd time he said, "Go out one more time with the lantern. Let's see if he dares to blow it out again." And sure enough, he did. But Dad came out. I don't know what he said to that boy, but he vanished and never touched our lanterns again.
What other kinds of fun you had when you were little?
When we were little, like I said, not much else. Then when we were a bit older, my friends and I, we couldn't wait for a dance or a wedding. We weren't invited, of course, because we were just kids. But we'd go anyway. We'd grab the hem of our skirts, you know? With our own dresses, we'd lift the hem like this, and they'd give us sweets. The person handing out the sweets would give us cakes, you know? Pastries. And then we'd stay for the dance. That was my favorite thing, the dancing. When I got home to Mum with a bundle of good pastries, my little brothers, and Mum, who had a sweet tooth, got so happy, you know.
How was the festivals like?
The festivals were beautiful, because they weren't like today's fairs. They were village celebrations, and there'd be dancing at night. The first day, not much happened until the evening. The second day, we were out in the street all day. And the ribbon day, well, almost all day too, since it was the last one, you know?
What was the ribbon day?
The ribbon. Do you know what that was? The young women, well, the mayordomos, the ones who organized the celebrations, gave us a strip of fabric. One in blue, another in different colors, you know? And we'd embroider our names on them. But that was when we were older girls. We'd embroider our names, and then roll them up and hang them on a rope between 2 poles. And the boys had to catch the ribbon, which meant riding their bikes and trying to snatch one with a little stick. That was the ribbon day. And before all that, well, in such a small village where there was nothing, whenever a music band from another town came, people went wild with joy. And Grandpa, who had been a musician in the village, it was his village, he'd say to me, "Come, the musicians are here. Let's go, quick." You know. And he'd take me to welcome the band. They came with big-headed puppets. You know what cabezudos are, right? Of course. And for me, that was the greatest thing. Every year he'd take me to see the music arrive. You know? That was my childhood. And that was it. We were happy. We were happy, even in the poverty we had. We were happy. Maybe even happier than people are now. Now that people have everything, you know? They've got everything. But kids today are so pressured to study. You know what I mean? It drives them crazy. They carry huge backpacks full of books, computers, everything. They don't have time to play. You know, they've got no time. No time at all.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. Sometimes looking back is not nostalgia, it is a living memory. What we heard today is not just a personal story, it's a voice that represents thousands of women, men, children who grew up in a rural Spain, shaped by scarcity, hard work, and a simple yet deeply human life. This voice, recreated through artificial intelligence to protect her privacy, belongs to someone who lived a childhood without luxuries, without shoes, without books, but full of love. And maybe that's everything, because even in poverty, even in the harshness of the fields, there was still room to share a piece of bread, to invite a friend to the local festival, or to smile even when the table was empty. Here at Jose Martin Composer, we don't just talk about music, we talk about legacy, about what we feel, about what must not be forgotten. Because if we don't document these stories, if we do not preserve them, the wind takes them away, and with them, a part of who we are. This interview is a testimony, a bridge between generations, a small act of resistance against time, and above all, a tribute to those who worked since childhood, who learned more from life than from books, who knew how to be happy with little, and who never stopped loving. Thank you for being here, thank you for listening, and most of all, thank you for remembering with us. Thank you so much for being here from my heart, from all of us hearts. Thank you for sharing your memories.
Thanks to you, Jose. It has been an extraordinary experience. Thank you for keeping our memories alive and for rescuing those long-forgotten memories. I truly hope that our audience and friends have learned and have remembered things from our time. A time where giving was the norm and loving was the standard between us. Thank you so much for having me.
Sometimes listening to the life of someone who came before us is like opening a window to another world. A world without luxuries, without rush, but full of the kind of truth that's hard to find today. The truth of effort, of dignity, of unconditional love. This story is not just a memory from the past. It is a trace, a beautiful scar that reminds us that was a time when, with just a piece of bread, a little oil and a smile, you could build an entire childhood. Today we live surrounded by screens, by endless options, by noise that won't let us hear what really matters. And that's why here at Jose Martin Composer we take the time to listen, to look back not with sadness but with respect. To give voice, even if it's digitally, to those who, out of privacy or modesty, chose to remain unseen. Because the story matters, because the story belongs to all of us. The voice you heard was generated by artificial intelligence solely to preserve this memory, to protect the identity of the person who shared it, and to pay tribute to a generation who knew what it's really like to live with little and yet feel fulfilled. Within these testimonies lies a quiet wisdom, one you won't find in books or social media. It is in hands worn out by the fields, in mothers who cooked lentils as if they were like feasts, in young girls who worked in silence, dreaming of a better world for their children. If there is something we can learn from all this, it is that happiness doesn't depend on what we have, but on how we love, how we care, how we remember. Thank you for being here. Thank you for honoring this story, and above all, thank you for keeping memory alive. See you in the next interview, where music and soul meet.